Really, I always enjoy this. So my name is Dr. Keith Montgomery. I used to teach at the UW. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the geologic history of Rib Mountain and Marathon County. So it's Rib Mountain and Marathon County because I can't really just talk about Rib Mountain. I have to put it in some larger context. So we'll talk as much about Marathon County as we do about Rib Mountain. So you recognize Rib Mountain, right? Seen here from the north up the top of 17th Street in Wausau. A little bump on the far left there is Mosinee Hill. All right, this is the upper Mosinee Hill. Another way of looking at the landscape, of course, is from above, and this is what's called a topographic map. So topos is the Greek word for form. So this topographic map shows, graphos shows the form of the landscape. And it shows it as lines, they're called contour lines, which are lines of elevation. So you can look at it and intuitively understand the shape of Rib Mountain here. And it's about 3.5 miles long. It's got that kind of rib-like shape to it. And if you can read the lines there, it's about 1940 feet above sea level. We've also got Mosinee Hills here, upper and lower, two of them, a little bit of a saddle in between. And then we have Hardwood Hill over in the southwest of the county here as well. They're all important because they're all the same type of hill, and they were all formed in the same way. It's just that Rib Mountain stands far above the other mountains. You're more aware of its existence there. So there's the Mosinee Hills, upper and lower. This is Hardwood Hill. It's tougher to get a photograph of Hardwood Hill. Not so many people know about Hardwood Hill. If you go on the top of Rib Mountain, how many people have been in the observation deck at the top of Rib Mountain? So if you're looking south, which I guess is really that way, but anyway, if you're looking south, look over towards the southwest and you'll see Hardwood Hill sitting there as an isolated hill. It's actually hard to see the Mosinee Hills from the observation deck because the trees have grown up a little too much here. Anyway, this is taken from Rib Mountain, Woodbine Avenue, or something like that. Okay, what's in a name? Is Rib Mountain a mountain? No. Well, you know what? It depends on when you ask that question, and it depends on who you ask. All right? So when 1899, the first federal geologic map of the area, geologic map, it's a topographic map. What's it called? Rib Hill. That's what people called it. You know, that's what they called it in the 1800s. So that's what appeared on maps. You also notice, by the way, I don't know if you can see this, but it says here, Weston. So Weston extended right across the river there at that particular time. The other thing that's really interesting about this map is look at the river, look at the Wisconsin River. So this is about 6 years before they built the dam down here in Rothschild. You know the dam over there by the paper mill? I think I'm pointing in the right direction here. Down here. But before they built the dam, this was very much a single channel river. And also Rib River was a narrow channel as well. But people around here started calling it a mountain in the 1920s. They called it Rib Mountain Ski Hill. They called the town Rib Mountain. It got separated from Weston. And when they formed the state park, they called it Rib Mountain State Park. And people were kind of just boosting the area, you know. We got a mountain here. You don't just go to say to people, come on up and ski on Rib Hill. No, you want to say ski on Rib Mountain, right? So they kind of changed the name. That was really kind of boosting it a little bit. And finally, in 1948, I can tell you exactly when because there's a record of it in federal documents. 1st of December 1948, the hill became a mountain. It became a mountain because people agreed here. Like, we call it a mountain. Let's change the name. So it depends on when you ask the question, also who you ask. If you ask people in the 1800s, they called it a hill. Now we call it a mountain. If you ask people in another country what they would call it, they would not call it a mountain. It doesn't stand high enough above the local terrain. Some countries have official definitions of mountains, and it's got to stand 1,000 feet above the local terrain, and Rib Mountain doesn't quite do that. Anyway, you know what? It's a mountain as far as we're concerned, right? Is it really a mountain? All right. Really, if you know what relief is? Well, I've written it right here, haven't I? It's high above the local terrain. So Rib Mountain is about 725 feet above the local terrain. You know, if you were down on the highway here or down on the golf course here. It's about 725 feet above the local terrain. I'd say in some countries they say it has to be 1,000 feet at least. But you know what? That's good enough. And I'll tell you why it's good enough. Because the elevation is 1940 feet above sea level. So don't confuse relief and elevation, all right? Relief is a local thing. Elevation is how far you are above sea level. Where's sea level? Where is sea level? Can I get to sea level from Rib Mountain? Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go down from Rib Mountain here, 1940. Let's go down to the Wisconsin River here, right? And let's canoe down the Wisconsin River. What river would I get to? Mississippi, yeah. We're in the Mississippi River Basin. You go down, you sail past, what? Canoe past Dubuque. You canoe past St. Louis. You end up where? What's the city close to the mouth of the Mississippi? Oh. New Orleans, all right? And then there's a very large delta that goes out into the Gulf. But that would be sea level. And it's only 1940 feet all the way down there to New Orleans. But that just tells you that the center of the continent is really kind of flat. You go all that distance and you only lose 1940 feet. The center of the continent is kind of flat, and frankly, Rib Mountain stands up in what is generally flat terrain. It's good enough, we'll call it a mountain. Thank you very much. But don't confuse these two terms, they're very different. Some people tell me, that the relief of Rib Mountain yeah, there used to be a publication that actually said the relief of Rib Mountain was 2,000 feet. No, it's not. That's the elevation, not the relief. Is it the highest point in Wisconsin? No. What is the highest point in Wisconsin?
Timms Hill.
Timms Hill, all right? I think we can say that Rib Mountain has the highest relief, okay? But it is not the highest point above sea level in Wisconsin. All right, so we've seen this, thank you, 1940 feet. This side here, it says Rib Mountain's highest point. It used to say Wisconsin's highest point until the 1950s. And then someone realized that Timms Hill is the highest point above sea level. Now, it's a bit of a cheat, I mean, look, the terrain in Wisconsin rises up towards the north, and then there's some glacial deposits on top of this. And so so Timms Hill just sits at the highest above sea level in Wisconsin, all right? And Rib Mountain is down in here. But Timms Hill itself is not an impressive hill. It's a bump in a log. It's a 1952, but the relief is only 425 feet. And in this glacial landscape, there's lots of little hills just like that here in Price County. So they're very proud of the fact that the highest elevation in Wisconsin. It always was. It just took until the 1950s before somebody realized it. The number was always there. But it's only about a quarter mile across, and it's only 425 feet tall. And it is composed of glacial sediment. It's composed of sand and gravel. Rib Mountain is composed of solid bedrock. It's composed of quartzite. So much more relief in Rib Mountain, much more, it's going to be a longer lasting feature in the landscape than Timms Hill will be. It's just composed of sand and gravel. But it's a great place to go by. It's a really nice place to go. Anyone been there? Yeah. It's got horse trails, bike trails, walking trails, and it's a nice view from the top. You can see the watchtower there at the top. There's also a wireless tower too. But it's in a landscape that's just generally humpy-bumpy. So it doesn't, Timms Hill is in there somewhere, right? There's a lot of other hills that are about the same altitude, elevation and relief as Timms Hill is. So I think Rib Mountain really does stand out. It stands out just enough that with the intervening landscape and the curvature of the earth, you can actually see Rib Mountain from Timms Hill if you know where to look. Okay? It's about 43 miles. But you know where to look? Oh yeah, there you go. The curvature of the earth gets in the way as well as intervening topography. But if you know where to look, Here I am, the tyrant himself, and I can see Red Mountain. Can you see Red Mountain there?
No.
On the horizon? Now, you can only see the top of it because of the curvature of the earth. You can't see the whole mountain. It's there. When I show it to you, you'll say, oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, you're right. See, it's right there. So, technically, yes, indeed, you can actually see Red Mountain from 40 odd miles away. Now, here's a question people overlook. What kind of mountain is Red Mountain? What kind of a mountain is it? Now, that's a funny question because is it volcanic?
No.
Is it a butte?
No.
Is it a fold mountain? Is it a plateau? There's different kinds of mountains, right? Red Mountain is a monadnock. Do not forget that word. Red Mountain is a monadnock. Formed in a very particular way. Now this here is Mount Monadnock. It's a native name. It was applied to this mountain here in New Hampshire, but it is also formed in the same way as Red Mountain, so people have taken that name as a general term. It's a type of mountain named Monadnock. So what type of mountain is this? What type of mountain is Mosinee Hill and Hardwood Hill and Red Mountain? Well, monadnocks are formed in this way. Here's a landscape like we have in Marathon County, looking at it sideways. And it's full of granite, right? Except in the middle of all this granite at one time in the geological history was this rock, which is Red Mountain quartzite. What kind of rock is quartzite? Yeah. It's metamorphic. And it is composed of quartz. Red Mountain is composed of almost pure quartz. And quartz is the toughest, commonest mineral you'll find on Earth. It's tough to scratch. You can scratch it with a diamond if you've got a diamond, but it's tough to scratch. It doesn't dissolve in acid easily. It's a rock that's going to survive. Granite, on the other hand, you think it's tough, right? But it's not made of just one mineral. It's made of lots of minerals, and of course something is only as strong as its weakest link. Granite has some quartz in it, but it's got a lot of other minerals that dissolve in acid, or you can scratch them easily, they get broken down. So, over geologic time, the landscape gets beaten down upon by rivers, by glaciers, by wind, by freezing and thawing. The landscapes gets worn down. I mean, an obvious thing is river valleys, right? Well, you have no idea how people used to think river valleys were formed. So the granite gets worn away. The quartzite gets worn away too, but it's much tougher than the surrounding rock. And so a monadnock is an isolated mountain composed of much more resistant rock than the surrounding rocks, and it is revealed, if you like, as the landscape is eroded. It's the same way as Mount Monadnock has been formed. It's the same way as Mosinee Hills, which are the same rock as Red Mountain. It's the same way as Hardwood Hill. Right? So it's a very particular kind of rock. So a lot of people also ask me, when was Red Mountain formed? And I have to say, you know what? That's really two questions. First of all, when was the rock formed, right? And then the second question is, how long did all this take, right? So it's really a process that formed Red Mountain, but I can pretty well tell you what rock type that is and when the rock was formed. But the mountain itself has taken a lot of time to form. You see there's two questions? Yeah. Red Mountain on the left, Mount Monadnock on the right. Wrongs. Some people tell me Red Mountain was pushed up out of the ground. Right? So there's this big mass of quartzite that was pushed up. There's even a plaque at the top of Red Mountain that says that, so it must be true, right? No, sorry. That is not how Red Mountain was formed. You just saw my previous animation, right? It just sat there as everything else was worn away, right? You think granite's tough? Quartzite will beat it every time, believe me. That's how tough quartzite is. Red Mountain was a volcano! That's City Page is a volcano. Rib Mountain erupts. You know what they say, right? Don't believe everything you read. So, unless you read it really carefully, all right? So, I guess if you're saying Rib Mountain's a volcano, you have to say Woodley Hills are volcanoes and Hardwood Hills is a volcano as well, right? There we go. See, City Pages can make that picture, and I can make pictures too. But now, it's made of quartzite. What kind of rock is quartzite? Metamorphic, right? It's not volcanic at all. It's metamorphic. Oh, it says it right there. You are smart. I just... You see, as like I said, don't believe everything you read unless you read it really carefully, because up here it does say April Fool's Day, 1995, all right? So it was a joke, but a lot of people believe it, actually. I think it's the best April Fool's cover City Pages has ever had. We'll have one at the end of this month as well. But no, it's quartzite. But what's really interesting about the quartzite, you can see how pure it is. It's quartz crystals. Very pure, but it started life as something very different. In some places in Rib Mountain, the original structures still survive, and here it is here. What does that look like? Sandstone. It was originally sandstone, which must have been subject to a lot of heat and some pressure, and the sand grains must have been very pure quartz. Some sand grains are that way, some sandstones are that way. So it got recrystallized to form a crystalline rock. But also you can see the ripples, right? These are the kind of ripples you find on a beach. So geologists can study the form of the ripples, and they can study the wavelengths of the ripples, and they can see what environment. They can see that those are beach ripples, not river ripples. Why are they upright? Because the forces that transform the sandstone into quartzite also tipped it up. So I wouldn't want to be sunbathing on this beach, but at one time it was a beach. So it's definitely not volcanic. Definitely not volcanic, twice over, right? So we're going to look at the geologic history of Marathon County and try to understand, how this might have come about. How do you study geologic history, right? So how do you study history? Read a book. Well, it's interesting you said textbook, right? But if you really want to study history, the textbook just tells you about what other people have studied. What other people studied is they went back and they looked at the original books at the time, the original accounts of what people were doing. So if you go back 1,000 years, you can see what people are thinking, you can see what they're talking about, you can find letters, you can piece together history and historical events. Now, it's written in crabby little handwriting, and it's written in Latin. Someone speaks German, and someone speaks French, and someone speaks Gaelic. The way to communicate across Europe, anyway, was in Latin, right? So you have to read the original source. So what's the original source if you want to read geologic history? The original source is the rocks. Right? The history of geology, the geological history of the earth is written in the rocks. Okay? So people used to come up with fantastical ideas about geological history. I mean, they just they made it up. And one of the things about science says, no, put it on the table, show me. Show me the proof here. So when the Geological Scientific Society, they were called the Royal Society, was formed in London in 1660. You know what their motto was? Very famous motto, take no man's word for it. Don't just tell me this, show me this. Show it to me, put it on the table. Put the rock on the table and tell me how that rock was formed. Right? It's very powerful. I don't care what Aristotle said. I don't care what Ptolemy said. Put it on the table. Right? So, geological history is recorded in the rocks. And almost always, these two principles are true. Now again, read carefully. I know there are some exceptions. All right? But the first one, which really started modern geology, was the present is the key to the past. See, people used to come up with fantastical theories, but what they realized was, you know what, let's study what happens in the world today. It may not seem very exciting sometimes, you know. Rivers flow in the landscape, occasionally they flood, they carry some sediment, but given enough time, those processes can transform the landscape. The oldest at the bottom, youngest at the top. You studied that in sedimentary rocks, right? So rocks are not like playing cards. You don't just shuffle them and stick them in any old way. Almost always the oldest at the bottom, the youngest at the top. Sometimes things get turned upside down, but almost always that's true. So, present is the key to unlock the past. People would come up with fantastical theories about rocks up in Germany and Scotland, and I'm from Scotland originally, if you're wondering, and then Russia, wherever, right? But then as people started traveling more and studying the world more, let's say here in 1789 they went to watch Vesuvius erupting in Italy. What's the town that Vesuvius buried? Pompeii, a suburb sort of Rome, Pompeii. And people were buried in the ash, and they were basically made into statues and very famous. So people studied the ash, and they studied what they thought were rocks forming out of the ash, and they studied lava flows, very dramatic in this diagram here, and they studied rocks when the lava solidified, the rocks that were formed. It sounds so easy. Then they went up to Germany and they said, we've got volcanic rocks here. They weren't formed at the bottom of an ocean, which is what people used to think. Granite wasn't formed in an ocean. It came out, it was a volcano, or was associated with a volcano. People would go to Scotland and say, there's a volcanic rock. There's no volcanoes there today, but there must have been in the past. And then 100 years after this, people would come to Marathon County and go, that's a volcanic rock. There must have been volcanoes here. So this takes a little bit of courage, you know, I think, really, to adhere with that principle. Science is a game of rules, right? And you have to run the rule. You can't just suddenly invent a new rule because it's convenient to do that. You can't travel with a ball, okay? You have to play by the rules. And then oldest at the bottom, youngest at the top. Where is this? Where's this landscape? Grand Canyon. So what kind of rocks are these here at the top? Sedimentary, right? So they're laid down in layers. And the oldest one is at the bottom, the youngest one is at the top. So the sandstones, limestones, and shales there, right? Okay. I think limestones are forming the cliffs, and this is shale forming the slopes, the lower, the gentler slopes there as well. And then right at the bottom is the gorge. That's the oldest rocks. And in the gorge, the rocks are very different. They're not sedimentary. They are much, much older than the sedimentary rocks here. They're igneous, they're metamorphic. You're talking about, let's say, 2 billion years here, and here you're talking about 2, 3, 4, 500 million years here. It's a huge difference in terms of age. This is called the basement, and everything else is built just on top of the basement. Right? There's the basement at the bottom there, and you can see the sedimentary rocks above it. What's this called? Generally speaking, what is it? Geologic timeline. It's organized the same way, right? I mean, we could have done it up the other way, but we didn't. Here's the basement, and here's the younger rocks. Be careful, read it carefully, okay? This is 4 billion years here. This is 550 million years. It's like an accordion here that stretched it out so they can fit in the detail here. There's less detail that's known about here. Right, so you just got to be a little careful in reading the geologic type scale. It's not a consistent scale. Here's the basement. Here's the basement. Here's the basement. In this case, here in Wisconsin.
I grew up there.
So in Wisconsin here, you been there?
I grew up around there.
You did. So this is on the East Bluff Trail. This is Elephant Cave. Elephant Rock looks like a buffalo to me, but anyway, does it look like that to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this is Elephant Cave. This is the basement rocks. This is about 1.5 billion years old. And this is the sedimentary rock sitting on top. It's like geologic timescale, right? This is the basement, and this is what's sitting on top of the basement. So there's one place in Wisconsin where you can literally put your finger on the basement, put your finger on other rocks, and there's about 1 billion years of difference right across that. Geology is exciting. So here's a geologic map of Wisconsin. It's tough to read because you're looking down from above here. You have to kind of think in another dimension. But the key is there, oldest to youngest. And if things look differently here, they do look different, right? This is the basement. And the basement extends all the way through and underneath Wisconsin. And these are much younger rocks. They're just like the Grand Canyon, and they're laid down on top of the basement. So let's say there's the basement. We'll go from south to north here, right? We'll just give it a different color, right? So it looks like the basement. And then we're going to lay down younger rocks on top of it, just like the Grand Canyon. Right? Anyway, the Grand Canyon things are worn away, right? We'll wear away these rocks. So if you're in the southern part of the state here, you're on this stack of rocks here. And maybe only in one place can you actually see the basement, and that's in the Barbers. If you're up here, where we are, we're sitting directly on the basement. Now this is what you call a cartoon, okay? This is a model. The crust actually kind of sags a little bit, so it's really not at a higher elevation here. This is just an abstract model. Yeah, there's a basement. Let's take off all of those rocks. That's North Central Wisconsin. Let's bring on some glacial sediment, right? Sand and gravel. Way after that. And then there we are here. Right? So, yes, this glacial sediment, but the basement pokes up in enough places that you can study what the basement rocks are, and you can study this history here in North Central Wisconsin. It has a very different geography and a very different history from what we're used to thinking about. Because it's all in this, it's all down here. Not much of this survives in North Central Wisconsin. So we have to be honest then with ourselves and actually use the same scale. And this is most of geologic time, and this is, to use a cliche, the icing on the cake. All right? So this is the basement, the foundation in more than one way. Moon is formed, water arrives, photosynthesis starts in the oceans, photosynthesis puts oxygen into the oceans, it finally finds its way up into the atmosphere gets oxygenated, the ozone layer forms out of oxygen, so the surface of the earth is protected from ultraviolet light. Plant life, are fungi plants? I should have studied biology instead of geology. Anyway, life gets onto the land, plants, and then it's up here, Phanerozoic, that we get visible and obvious light. Phanerozoic comes from the Greek line phaneros, Greek word phaneros, it means visible, and zoos means life, all right, visible life. What did you say? It's probably a lot funnier than what I said. No. What did you say? Well, you're laughing, that's all I'm saying. So, we study the events in Marathon County, at least what's left. We're here. I mean, we're down in the middle of this, right? So look at that. What a great map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some sense out of this by generalizing, but you recognize some of these names. There's granites, there's quartz, quartzite, there's, you might recognize diorite, there's gneiss, everybody's favorite, and then there's also basalt. You might recognize some names there. But the other thing that's very different is the geography of the world was completely different at that time. You've got to think in a different time and place. So did you study Pangaea? Oh, that's... When did Pangaea start? So you had Pangaea, right? And then it broke apart? Yeah. So let me tell you this then. Okay, so when did Pangaea start to break?
225 to 200 million years ago.
So it was a supercontinent, right? So do you think that this supercontinent existed for almost 4.5 billion years, right? And then suddenly decided, I don't like this. We're going to break apart. Right? I mean, why would it suddenly break apart? And the answer is,
Things started to diverge.
they started to diverge. But the answer is, I can't remember what the question was. What was my question again? The answer is that Pangaeas, plural, had been forming and breaking apart throughout geologic time. Pangaea was just the last supercontinent. Right? You know how I look at the geography of the Earth? Right? You got Pangaea, right? And Pangaea breaks apart, right? So from your point of view, this is, what's this? The Americas, right? And this is Europe and Asia, right? And what's in the middle there? Which one? Atlantic. So the way I look at the geography of the Earth is, the Atlantic is in the middle of Pangaea. And the Pacific rim is on the outside of Pangaea. And that's where all the subduction is, most of the subduction is taking place in the world. Right? Got a different way of looking at the world? The interior and the exterior of Pangaea. So let's run this. This is 700 million years ago. This is only one geography. And I'm just going to tell you, this is the United States of North America here. This is Europe. Now you can just about make out Scandinavia, which didn't exist then. I have no idea what this is. But let's form Pangaea. Let's create it. And then let's break it apart. Look at that. Wow, look at that. Isn't that great? So the history of Marathon County, the geologic history of Marathon, is in here somewhere. It's not even in there, it's even before that. All right, let's just look at one more thing here. Ready? Look at two things. Here's North America. Where's North America? Here's North America there, right? And there's the Western Mountains, Mexico as well. There's South Africa there, Pangaea. Then it breaks apart and told me 200 million years ago. Let's look at Pangaea. Look at one more thing here. Oh, come on. There's India. Watch. Bang! It hits Asia there and forms the mountains of Tibet. So you've got continent. Even as Pangaea was splitting apart, you also got collisions taking place as well. I'll just point out one more collision here. On the west coast of North America, there's the Western Mountains here. Yeah, hurry up, go on, move it. There's the west. Thank you. There's the Western Mountains there, so they collided on to the edge. So this is the geography of Marathon County 2 billion years ago. Continents were colliding here and forming what became the basement of North America. Now, if you don't believe me, and there were huge mountains formed too. We don't know exactly how huge they were, but they were probably at least as big as, let's say, the Cascades, right? They were called the Pinocchian Mountains from a native term. So, how are we going to prove this? How are we going to prove this? Continents colliding here. Well, let's see. Put it on the table. We got any evidence of all continents? So this is kind of where we were after the collision But there should be evidence of old continents, and there are in the rocks, metamorphic rocks. Over here in Marshfield, for example, we can look at some gneisses. You can see that they have these nice wavy lines in them. They weren't molten, but they were under such heat they became kind of plastic. Okay? And they were also recrystallized. So we can see a 2 billion year old continent there. Also, beaches, right? They're going to get smooshed. But there were beaches. You had to take spring break in the Archean period, right? So there was beaches there. How do I know there were beaches? I showed you. There in Rib Mountain. The beach got smooshed, it got recrystallized, it's quartzite, it gets tipped up, but there it is. We can see, and we can also see some of these, maybe in Powers Bluff, further south in Wood County as well. Ocean crust. It better be ocean crust here. Well, you take the trip out Highway A towards Little Chicago. Ocean crust. Ocean crust is very distinct. It's basalt, but it forms pillows. And there's a pillow form to it. Because the lava comes up, it hits the seawater, and the seawater forms a crust, and it creates a kind of pillow. More lava punches up through that, and it creates another pillow, punches up through that, and it creates a very distinct form, unlike basalt that flows onto land. Marathon County, here's basalt here. Now it's a black rock, but my cell phone picked up some other minerals reflecting off it, which is good because I think you can't see this with the naked eye, but it does show the structure better, so I'm not going to change it to black and white. But you can see the pillows here in this basalt. So you go out towards Little Chicago, you through a road cut there. If you look carefully, you can see these things. What else would you find? Volcanic rocks. It better be volcanic rocks in Marathon County, right? Rhyolite is a lava. Back at Tom Field, you can find lava that is characteristic of continental volcanoes, like Mount Vesuvius, or like Mount Rainier, or Mount St. Helens. And you can even see some of the lines here. Little black dots are quartz crystals, but you can see some of the lines there as well. I don't know if you remember, no you wouldn't, but Mount St. Helens blew up. And this isn't Mount St. Helens, this is somewhere else, I can't remember now. But there's a lot of dust and ash that's formed out of volcanoes too, and we find that in Marathon County. Up 6th Street, as you go north out of town, towards Merrill, if you take the back road there, as you go up the hill, you'll see a road cut. You can see the layers of ash. They're now a solid rock called tephra. Some coarser stuff too. I'm going to go through here kind of quickly. And I would expect to find granite. I would expect to find granite because that would form the reservoirs that the lava came from. And we have lots of granite in Marathon County. In fact, Marathon County is very famous for it. I know the ski hill is called Granite Peak, but that peak is quartzite. Okay? The name just honors the rock that's found throughout Marathon County and quarries in Marathon County. So, Rib Mountain rock at one time then was buried within these mountains. There are some younger rocks in Marathon County. There is some Cambrian rock that's been eroded away. Sandstone, it's got signs of life. You know what I like about this? This is in the Krokowski Rock Quarry in the southeastern part of the county. You know what I like about this? There seems to be a certain poetry to the fact that there is, on the top of Rib Mountain, beach rock that was metamorphosed at a time when the earth was lifeless. And then down here, 1.5 billion years later, we've got a beach sandstone that's flat, and it's got clear signs of life within it. This is a big sluggy type thing that moved through the sand. So just remember though, the age of the rock is not the age of the mountain. Okay? And Rib Mountain is being eroded as we speak, but so is the rest of the landscape. So these have survived though because Rib Mountain wasn't glaciated, not the top anyway. All right, listen, thank you.
Thank you.